Hey everybody, Stuart here with Reanimated. HA and I are out and about enjoying the holidays, some travels. We'll be back with you pretty soon, but in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with Anna and the Apocalypse, an encore presentation of episode 201 of the podcast. It's one of the few zombie movies about Christmas and the holidays, and it's a pretty damn good musical to boot.
You know, one thing I did note with this film, and so I got to see this in New York at a screening where they actually had Ella Hunt do a Q&A afterwards. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, because everybody, and you see this in news articles and things like that, everybody keeps talking about how low budget it is, but there really isn't a lot of information about actually what it cost. I did find something like very small that basically it was around $1 million and change. Which is actually pretty low budget for a movie like this. But I think it's interesting that they chose not to talk about the actual number because $1 million doesn't sound as low budget as, say, like 500,000 would.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, thinking about that and what a production would cost, the costuming, the music, the choreo, all that stuff. This is a pretty well done film, I think, for that budget. But I kind of wish they had been a little bit more open about what it was in general. So do you know any of the background of this film?
Only from where we've been sitting here in Reanimated headquarters, where I wanted to see this when it first was promoted in 2017, when it was hitting film festivals in Austin, which is apparently the first time the cast even got to see the movie, was in Texas, right. Which seems a little bit unfair. But yeah, I mean, it languished for a while, so I don't know what happened between 2017 and its actual release at the end of last year. Do you have any idea?
No. They showed the little box office in the Wikipedia article, which is a little bit over 600,000 is what it has made. But I'm wondering if it's going to make back a lot just with Amazon. And, you know, they were pretty just heavily promoting this in general to try to get you to buy it ahead of time. And my guess is that there will be yet another push probably in the next Christmas season so that they can make money on that. And I have a feeling it's going to make a lot more money on the streaming end of things eventually. It's just going to take a little bit of time. I do want to talk about Ryan McHenry a little bit. And Ryan McHenry was a Scottish film director, and this is what the film was based upon, the zombie musical. It's a short, it's honest, it's okay, and you can see a little bit of the flavor of this coming through. But what he is probably more known for is the Ryan Gosling Doesn't Want to Eat His Cereal shorts. Did you ever see those?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he died during the production of this film. Or maybe a little bit ahead of it. He had cancer. They thought it was in remission, and it came back. And it was really, it's a tragedy on many levels. But one of the things that once we finish our review, or we can talk about during the review, is that he had a very specific vision about what this would be, which was much more Shaun of the Dead, and definitely dark, but fun throughout. And so the people that were left to sort of work with this film and not, I don't know. I think it's in part because it was left. John McPhail is the director of this, and then the screenplay. The other person who helped with this, who did the screenplay, was Alan McDonald, and I think that they were impacted certainly by Ryan's death. But also had a different vision for what those would be. And I think the themes became a lot darker, but not necessarily out of line with the zombie film in the first place. So, but it is a zombie musical. So I think,
it's not dark overall, I would say. This is...
there's darker pieces that I think as I said, he was much more wanting this to be a little bit happy and peppy throughout, and not necessarily have some of the things like toward the end. But why don't we hop into it, and let's talk about the cast.
Well, you mentioned Ella Hunt. She is the lead. She's the hero. There's kind of no mixing that message. I think she does a pretty good she does a great job. She seems to be a good singer. She has these doleful eyes that sort of just she seems to be pretty sad a lot of the time, which I think her character is kind of supposed to be generally a little bit sad throughout the film.
Yeah, she's got a little bit of ennui going on. And this was really, I mean, I have to say, just watching her in the Q&A, and she probably had to do like a ton of those, but she was so extraordinarily polished, and you know how it is at those kinds of things, because there's obviously going to be a lot of zombie film fans at these kinds of things, and she was taking a lot of negative questions and handling it really well. So
you say there was a lot of like weird, oh, you're so attractive, I would like to date you kind of weird stuff too?
There were a couple of those questions, but primarily, and I think I don't know if we talked about this, but one of the things that this film came under fire for was that people felt like it didn't do anything new, like it yanked a lot from Shaun of the Dead. And there's a specific scene, like the one that I think everybody saw in the trailers, where they're, you know, dancing through the apocalypse without really noticing. And a lot of people took issue with that. And there were like 3 different people in the theater that were they were just like, honestly, they were being jerks. And she's not the director, you know,
Yeah.
and she handled it with honestly such grace. I wanted to applaud her. I thought she did a phenomenal job of diffusing it and just basically saying, like, you know, like she viewed it more as an homage, and I think that's what the directors did. And, you know, zombie films, as we've seen, they reference each other all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of see what some of the critics are saying, but I just think people were getting a little too worked up about it. And I think especially in this scenario, the audience was really, I mean, she managed to turn this situation, and she came out looking good. She just was like very even and redirected in a way that I was truly impressed with. And I've seen other actors like that are a lot more experienced, not able to turn the tide like that in such a way.
Yeah.
So
she's a young woman. I mean, she's 20.
Yeah.
She was probably less than that then.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh man. But overall, I think people need to be a little bit, not a little bit, people just need to generally be more respectful. Because I don't know, it's just annoying to me that like you have somebody there who can answer really cool questions, and then you're talking to them about that kind of thing. I don't know.
The wrong kind of questions. So my only critique of the performance was that this could be down to the choreography too, but I didn't really dig her dancing that much. There were a couple scenes where she had to like dance.
Yeah, I think she was. Like, no, I don't think she's a dancer.
didn't strike me as a dancer.
Yeah.
Playing across from her, Malcolm Cumming is John, and he's a lot of fun to look at, just to watch. I love him. He does a great job on screen. Steph is the American in the cast, kind of just happens to be there. Somebody calls her Annie Lennox they're teasing her at some point, and then there's a scene in the bowling alley where I think she actually looks a lot like Annie Lennox for a second. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. She also is choreographer. She's choreographer for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize. Well, she's good. She does a good job. I like a lot of her facial expressions, and she plays socially awkward pretty darn well. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember who Chris. Oh, yeah, Chris, of course, the video guy. Mm-hmm. Sure, great job. Ben Wiggins is the jock, Nick, and he's unlikable. If that was the job, the mission accomplished. And then on and on. But the one, so Paul Kaye is Arthur Savage, the headmaster. Do you recognize him from Game of Thrones?
I do. But he also did he does I think stand-up or other stuff. I think he's a well-known kind of comedian, maybe? And he plays this in a very character actor-y kind of a way.
I don't know him from that, but he is Thoros, I forget what, he's from across the sea. He lights his sword on fire. In the books, He's quite an iconic character. In the TV show, he hasn't gotten nearly as much screen time.
Nope.
But it's cool to see him doing something completely different.
You could tell. I mean, at least it seemed to me like he was having a lot of fun.
He did seem to be enjoying himself. Yeah.
And then we've also got Marley Sue, who's Lisa, who is the girlfriend of of Chris, basically.
Yeah.
And they're like our kind of happy, normal teenage couple, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And we've got
And Mark Benton is Ella's dad, or Anna Shepard's dad. Who gets so let's talk let's talk about the movie a little bit. This movie has 9 tracks in it, 9 songs, I guess 9 musical numbers, and overall, as taken as a whole, I really enjoyed them. Did you have a favorite?
I definitely thought that the sort of 2 big set pieces in the beginning were, and I mean, I think they're meant to be that way, but waiting to turning my life around, and then the one in the lunchroom, the Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
Those 2 were very, very catchy. And close third is the fish rap, which I really love.
I mean, that's hardly okay. If you count that, that's 10.
It's still on the soundtrack, and it makes me really happy.
Did you get the soundtrack?
Yes, of course I did.
Okay.
Actually, Bill got the soundtrack.
Oh wow, well done. Yeah, so I it caught me off guard. I knew this was a musical, but then they start singing that first song, the "Gotta Break Away" one, and my brain always has to do this when I watch a musical. I'm like, all right, so are they actually singing? Nobody's reacting to them like they just broke into song. So this is like their inner monologue. So like basically, song acts as an inner monologue in a musical. Is that correct? Is that how this is supposed to work?
Yeah, but I think in this case, that's definitely the way they sort of have different teachers and stuff getting into it. I think people are, it's not supposed to actually be happening, but yeah.
Yeah. So
it's giving you some background. It's giving you the internal struggle, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it just takes a second for my brain to switch from everything is as you see it to something a little more abstract, which is kind of musicals are abstract in that way, right?
Right. And what I would say is that when I went to this, I made Bill go, and Bill actually likes musicals a lot, and I don't think he quite knew what he was getting into when he saw this, and he was so happy for the first 3 songs. And I think enjoyed that a lot more than he thought he would. So I remember when the first one started and he was like, yeah. So hence the buying of the soundtrack.
Yeah, I kind of wish that my wife had been around when I started watching this, but she came home later than, like in the last 20, 30 minutes of the film. So she only caught the last 3 tracks, which are not the
not
best.
Not strong.
But it's still, when it takes all of the tension, all of the fear out of the scene because these are like this is the scary climax of the movie, right? Where they're in the lunchroom and and Savage is singing at them through the cafeteria fence or whatever that thing is. And my wife does not enjoy zombie movies. We know about this on this show.
Yep.
But as soon as the singing starts, it's like, oh, fine. This is no problem. I got this. So it's cool for casuals, I guess. I
guess so.
I guess I like those first 2 tracks a lot too, and then I also really like the "I'm Ready," the Zombie Dawn song. Even if I didn't love the dancing, I really just loved what Malcolm Cumming was doing in that song. Yeah,
no, he did a great job. And one thing I will say is that I did think that the choreography, especially in Hollywood Ending, was very good.
Yeah.
And I thought some of it was pretty good in Turning My Life Around. But especially the way the lunchroom is set up, and you have like all these characters that are kind of joining in, like random teachers, and I thought that was a lot of fun.
What's funny about how random that is when you read the credits at the end of the film, that scene is almost it has the whole ensemble cast in it. I'm pretty sure, except for some of the parents who show up later, and Chris's grandmother. But it's a lot of extras hired by like some talent agency. Like it's listed in the credits, like for this for the Hollywood Ending scene in the cafeteria, they show like the 4 agencies, like Crowds on Call or something.
Right.
And another, just what I'm talking about, the end credits and apparently the budget of the film, the end crawl was done by endcrawl.com. Which you just don't see that in movies. So I kind of enjoyed seeing that. It feels unpretentious in a way.
Right.
They're just like, they're putting this thing together with nuts and bolts, which I like.
I definitely got the sense that, and I understand, like, I totally got, especially for the first, I feel like the first half of the film was a lot tighter than the second half, personally.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think some of it may have been budget issues, like maybe you have a lot to work with and you kind of thought out these first parts of it. I think it would be interesting to know whether, how much was done, like, because it's not clear to me how much was finished just in terms of, like, the storytelling and everything before Ryan McHenry died. But I also feel like with a film like this where you've got this budget and you want to like focus on it, you want to bring people in from the beginning, I definitely feel like I was really into it up until like the pageant scene, I guess. And
no,
then
that's not too far into it.
I know. And a little bit after the pageant scene, like I definitely liked I agree with you. I liked the whole song with what's his face, the jerk. Why am I?
Oh, you like the Top of My Class, I'm a Soldier at War, that song?
I didn't love that, but I liked the sort of like way that narrative was going, just in terms of sort of tweaking what the characters were thinking about this world.
Yeah.
But the ending I did feel was not as strong as it could have been. You know, I like, but again, budget constraints and all of that. One thing that I did note, and I thought, I mean, granted, it is in Scotland, but this is a very, very white cast. And I think that, they're just kind of dealing with what they got in Scotland. And I get that, but it felt markedly white.
You say this is in Scotland, but I'm also like, who even in this movie even has a Scottish accent? There's like two characters.
Well,
Ella,
John does.
John? Sorry, John.
Buddy,
yes.
and his best friend.
Yes, he is one of the only people. Maybe Lisa has one. It's hard to, I'm not good at accents. But Ella and her dad, both, he has a Northern England accent. He's from, the actor's from north of York. So he's closer to Scotland than anybody else, but it's still an English accent. And hers is just London. Hers is a
yeah.
They didn't even try to like make it seem like these two people should have grown up in the same house. Is one of the is a critique I guess that I could have. And there's just not enough Scotland going on. I want some really broad Scottish accents, which I guess is a good thing they didn't have them, because also when I rented this on Amazon Prime, there's no subtitles. So maybe I should be careful what I wish for and just be happy that I got a bunch of understandable people.
Right. You know, that's just a small note, and I get the constraints, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more of a diverse cast in this. But in any case, I did think that this was a lot of fun. You know, it's very, the teenage angst, the whole like girl who wants to get out of her small town and travel, and then other things become more important. I really liked the relationship between Anna and John, though tragic as it ends up being ultimately. But you kind of could see, I don't know if you called this, but I was like, this is not going to end well, even from the first scene with them in the car together. I was like, he's too endearing.
Yeah, you're right.
The world's too good for him. And I was really bummed out up until the point where, of course, he you know, sacrifices himself. Like, I just, he had like the black mark on him from the get-go.
I kind of feel like that this toes some lines that I feel like are developing in romantic comedies for the whatever the generation after millennials is going to be called, where it's
Generation Z, you mean?
Sure, whatever. You know, I kind of hate generation labels, but as a Gen Xer, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean about my life. Because I feel like I saw this in the Netflix original All the Boys I Loved Before, I think it was called. I don't know if you ever saw that. I watched it with Holly, you know, as one will, where the girl ends up with an unlikely guy, and in this case, the girl kind of ends up with Nick, who is a complete raging asshole for the like 75% of the movie. And sure, they don't end up together romantically, but they are literally like the last heterosexual couple in the world. Because they're friends. their friend Steph is swings for the other team, as it were.
She does, but if you notice, the two of them end up in the front seat together. So I think that there is some sort of implication that maybe
Ella's in the back
is
seat.
gonna. Oh, is she in the back seat? Oh, sorry.
No, maybe it was the other way. I forget. But okay, I'm not reading much into where they're sitting in the car. But they definitely, the film does not give John a fighting chance, as we know. Like Ella shoots him down halfway through the film. Puts him
that's the worst.
Squarely in the friend zone. And it's actually from there that you know that he's doomed.
Yeah. So I had a little bit of a different take. I was actually really happy that there was no, even though she kind of ends up as a survivor, with, the jerky guy, with Nick. I don't think that there's the implication that they're necessarily together. I'm not saying that her and Steph are going to get together or anything like that, but I don't get the sense that any of them are going to necessarily be romantically involved.
That's
and
fair.
So I was glad they did not do that, because basically she's just like, yeah, you're still a jerk.
But his character changes so much from the beginning to the end of the film.
It does.
By the end of the film, he is a sympathetic character. We're kind of like, yeah, I'm glad that you're with him because he can handle himself. And now he's a nice guy, and maybe now we consider him as the audience like a potentially decent mate or whatever the hell we're gonna, a good couple. Whereas John, who was without argument like the best person, the best guy in this film, except for maybe her dad also is not super open-minded at the beginning of the film. So John is the guy. He's the one. He's the best. But she doesn't want anything to do with him beyond joking around and making snow angels. It's just it's a tough break, and I think it's interesting that I feel like I've seen this in a couple of other films. In the All the Boys I Loved Before movie, she ends up with the jock, but the jock also has like nuance. He's like got more sides to him, and so it's like he is an interestingly written character. Nick does not have nearly as many angles. There's not enough time to develop those. But he does become a lot more sympathetic by the end of the film. So that's the observation I had. I'm curious if this is a trend.
I don't think this is a new trend, because this is way back to the Pretty in Pink conundrum, which is that basically that main character that was played by Molly Ringwald was supposed to, like, they actually did tests with test audiences where she ends up with Ducky, which I think most people and most women will agree that Ducky is the character you love the most, in terms of like her potential love interest, and everybody doesn't understand why she doesn't end up with that guy, because he's like the best. And instead she ends up with Andrew McCarthy, who looks like he's like 30 years old in the movie, and doesn't really seem to have many redeeming qualities. He hands out his best friend. His name's Steph. Steph's a jerk.
I was thinking about Molly Ringwald movies when I was thinking about this argument, and I couldn't remember who she ended up with. And I had
in that
feeling,
film,
though,
she ends up with Andrew McCarthy,
yeah.
and then obviously there's a lot of issues with it. But 16 Candles, she also ends up with Jock, not the geek. And then apparently, as a reaction to this, John Hughes did Some Kind of Wonderful, but in that it's the guy protagonist, and he ends up with Mary Stuart Masterson instead of Leah, whatever her name was. But that's a very different dynamic, just because it's the guy that's the sort of, part of the love triangle versus a woman with two men. So it's interesting.
In future generations of these films, in rom-coms in the 90s and early 2000s, like the Freddie Prinze Jr. era, I know that we went through this phase of like, girl takes off glasses, shakes out hair,
and looks amazing.
And then like there were those films which don't really mirror or parallel what we're talking about now. But has there ever been a time when the female lead ends up with the correct guy from like a personality perspective?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I'm sure there is. But I can't think of it offhand. I'm sure some of our listeners can come up with something too, and I'll have to think about it. But I know that there is.
It's not something we're used to talking about on Reanimated, so I apologize.
No, I'm like, you caught me a little bit off guard. The rom-com thing is more of Bill's forte than mine. I fully admit.
So another thing, though, another trend, maybe not, is how sex is addressed in this film. And it's not like it's center. It's just mentioned once or twice that Ella's had a lot of boyfriends, that she does. And she also says at one point, I don't care about sex. But she's talking to Nick in this scene, and she says, you hurt my feelings when you shared a bunch of personal stuff that I told you with people, but I didn't care. Right. I don't care about sex. Like, and so this kind of like approaching sex as something that isn't this like sacred taboo. It just seems like it's not as much of a taboo subject anymore.
I think you're right that they actually address this in a way that, just makes it somewhat normal. And you also have the relationship between Chris and Lisa, and they are clearly having sex all the time. And
monogamous, right? Like,
oh yeah, monogamous, but like
solo, or not solo, but yeah, one-on-one.
Yeah. Yeah. But then they also have, there is a scene with Lisa with her dirty Christmas song, which is hilarious.
I want to bang Santa or whatever that.
Yeah. But that one is like, but I think it's taking it with a sense of humor. So yeah, that's definitely a theme here. But do you want to like talk about some of the stuff that they do pull from the criticism in terms of the Shaun of the Dead-esque stuff?
Sure. What do you got? I honestly was not picking up on it much. So,
well, I think clearly there's the obvious, which I think Shaun of the Dead did this, but I think lots of movies do this, and it's sort of a zombie film specifically where it's that, the zombie plague is indicated, or whatever is happening is indicated. We hear it from the get-go on the news report when they're in the car. Mm-hmm. Going into school. Anna and her buddy John are being driven to school by her dad. And there's a news report about this crazy flu and that it's causing, and, it does kind of a similar thing that they do with Shaun of the Dead, where it's like they cut off the news report right as it's about to tell people that they're reanimating. And then you see sort of hints of it throughout, like in the background, like different people that are clearly infected.
Well, she shoulder checks a zombie also when she's leaving school on that day. So that scene, I thought was
like there's stuff like that, and they do that with Shaun of the Dead as well. But there's other films that do that, to the same level, and I guess that's just, to me, that's a little bit of the sort of like, in this case, I think it's more focusing on the sort of self. Like how teenagers just don't really think that much outside of their own little personal worlds.
But the changing the radio station is so common in zombie movies, it might as well just be like a required ingredient.
Right. I didn't think that was like, I think the people that are getting all up in arms about this need to figure out something else to worry about, because I really just thought this was fun. And then the big music, the big set piece, Turning My Life Around, that I thought, clearly they took a lot to choreograph that. They definitely had fun doing it. But like, I really, that I could watch that over and over again. I thought that was so much fun. Where they're just kind of putting in their earbuds, ignoring everything, and having a lot of near misses, and everything is going to hell around them, and they just don't notice. And I do think that there is a commentary here, much like the thing that we talked about earlier with people just looking at their phones all the time.
Yep.
I think that's the commentary. And they also have another song in this whole film that I think is a little too annoying, but.
Oh, which one?
The Human Voice.
Yeah, well, that's the anti-technology song, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's looking at their phones during that song. And it's, this is like one of these quiet ones. This is like the bleakest moment of the film, or it's supposed to be a bleak moment. The bleakest moment is probably, I Will Believe, the last song in the whole movie, where they're surrounded, even though we all know that Steph is out there with her car and she's going to rescue them. In a way, I kind of wish that had happened so much faster.
Yeah, it took a long time.
But yeah, there's two songs that are pretty slow and bleak.
There was like definitely a few things within this film. Like, I was convinced the grandma was going to come back and like kill people, and she didn't. I did, like, I kept expecting, and I did like the little shout out to Ryan and Ryan Gosling and McHenry when they did when they were all in the ball pit and talking about who might be dead and alive, like the celebrities.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah, not Tay-Tay.
Why would you even say that?
Right, and then the whole Ryan, that was like very sweet. But I kept being convinced that like eventually it happened, but I was like, there's got to be a zombie in there with them.
It was funny when the film suggested that they had all fallen asleep in the ball pit, which is not a big inflatable swimming pool, and 4 people sleeping in there. And under balls? I would not.
I know, and they make noise. I don't know. But I definitely thought that the cast clearly was having fun with this and did a good job. The other scene that really stood out to me was the part where the whole trope where you walk through the woods, but instead through the woods, it's through the Christmas tree farm. Mm-hmm. You take the shortcut, and it was inside. And I mean, I thought that was like a very clever way.
You mean the scene where Nick gets all of his friends killed?
Yes, that one, and also John gets killed. But I thought that sort of trope, that take on the trope, I thought was very good. Mm-hmm. I really had fun watching this overall. I definitely have some criticisms in general, just in terms of like the second half, but I really enjoyed what they did here, and I don't know, I would definitely watch this again. I think we're gonna probably do. Yeah.
How would you want the second half to have gone? I'm trying to think.
So one of the things that, you and I have talked about this before, and it's the whole trope of the sort of the main hero suddenly becoming really good at killing zombies. And they do this with her, and it's like, I get it. I think what bothers me about this is that, like, they kind of get her there in terms of her reticence. Like, oh, I don't want to kill these people. I don't want to do whatever. We see that she observes Nick doing his whole thing, and basically being like, no, you got to kill them. And I just feel like there's a little bit, the stuff that they did with her character, I wish they had done, I don't want to say that they had made her less whiny, but there's something about like the end of it that really troubled me. I just feel like, I wanted a little bit more out of her at the end. And I didn't feel like I got it. And that's I guess my own issue with it.
What do you mean by you wanted something more out of her? Can you be more specific?
Well, I mean, you start out with her in the beginning looking for something more, and you do see her appreciating her father a little bit more as he's dying. You see her,
it's a pretty low bar.
It's like, but he's like dying. You see her appreciating John just when he's dying.
Yeah.
And there are things that make her character somewhat not likable. And much like Nick becomes more likable, I feel like she becomes less likable.
Like she's just kind of self-involved
yeah. And you don't see that growth. Like, you only see her sort of forced to growth because all these people have been stripped away from her. But you don't really see her appreciating their sacrifices to the level that I probably would have expected for this character. And, so it's, to me, it's a little bit of a flat ending. And definitely not because of the acting chops of Ella Hunt at all. Not saying that in the least. I just think there wasn't a ton to work with the script, which is what I'm talking about. Like, the character development fell flat to me toward the end. And this is why I'm wondering if some of this stuff hadn't been really developed. It didn't seem like there was much of an idea of what they were going to do beyond, like, they were like, we got these really great numbers. Okay, now we're going to do this. I don't know. Like, it just felt like they hadn't rounded it out enough. So that was my only sort of criticism in general. I guess I wanted her to dominate a little bit more and become much more of a whole person. And, you see her mourning John, but not, like it's like moving on. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's just one person's take on it. And again, low budget, they like, I get the decisions that you kind of have to make in your storytelling. So maybe there just wasn't time to polish that stuff up enough. But that was kind of where I I felt much less positively towards this movie at the end than I did at the beginning.
Well, that final scene when the song "No Such Thing as a Hollywood Ending" is playing in the background, the three of them are just driving. I think Steph says, "So where to?" and nobody answers, and it does seem a little bit like, "Oh, we're still screwed." Or isn't this exactly? In one way, you're like, "Well, this is exactly what Ella wanted, is just to be like a leaf on the wind kind of traveler." But on the other hand, I think that it seems like they're all having this realization, like, we have nowhere to go.
Right.
We have no hope, in a way. Except,
that's a valid ending, but I don't know. I think you always have to have a little sliver of hope somewhere in there.
It does help to do that. Yeah. It's like, that's Day of the Dead ends with them flying away in a helicopter and like not sure where they're going to go. Other than they land on a beach, I feel like, when we reviewed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is fairly typical for the ending of a zombie movie. But it's interesting just because it's not Australia, which is where she wanted to go, but she's traveling all right.
Although one could also make the argument that she's trapped forever because she can't go anywhere.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. So Savage, did you have any negative reactions to the way his story played out?
Sorry, who?
The headmaster.
So when we saw him initially, he is very mustache twirly or beard twirly, as it may be, since he's got that phenomenal beard going on. He plays that very tropey headmaster character. I think that he gets into the weeds a little bit and they make him this evil, like beyond evil character. And then basically he's like, yes, I am going to be chaos because that's my role to play and all this other stuff. And I felt like it was a little bit over the top. I still think he was a really fun character, but especially in those ending scenes, like it was just a little ridiculous. But, I think that was somewhat deliberate and they wanted to make him somewhat of a caricature anyway. So, I didn't I get what they were doing, but he was just so over the top, especially in the last scene between, Anna and her dad, where he's like taking her dad hostage. Like, who does that? And would you really do that in the middle of this thing? I don't think so. So.
Yeah, it's He definitely goes off a deep end, and murders a whole bunch of people by proxy. Anyway, so the film needed a human villain, and so he did as great a job as anybody, barring the usual suspects of the military gone rogue or looters or anybody else. So yeah. If you're gonna fit it into a small, tight storyline like this, you might as well make it the real a-hole headmaster. Yes, he's a sociopath. He'll do just fine. And of course he was just a fun performer to watch. And when he starts singing, it's like a whole nother level to his character. So, and also he does some pretty peppy leg steps, dance moves. So I was into it.
Yeah, I actually liked the music when he just sort of steps in to the Hollywood ending. Or he just kind of steps in and then fades away. I just thought that was brilliant. I thought he did a great job. On second watch, I still very much enjoyed it. I still felt like the first half was much more successful than the second half, but I definitely think that it deserves the accolades it got. It's fun, and I think if you read too much into it, certainly you're expecting a super high-end polished thing, you're going to get disappointed by this. One thing I will point out though, and this is one thing that I think is very positive, is that the short that this was based on is actually, there's some pretty disturbing stuff in that. And they have an almost rape of what would be the Anna character, and some other stuff going on, that I think that they made a good decision to sort of switch that up and make her a different kind of a character. And so I was happy that they made that switch. But it's kind of interesting to watch it. It isn't good. I won't say that it is. But you can see the sort of kernels of what eventually became Anna and the Apocalypse, if you see it.
Okay. Where can one see the zombie musical?
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
So you can just look it up.
Well, do we have any other parting thoughts about Anna and the Apocalypse? Do we wish they would make a sequel?
I don't know that a sequel is necessary, though I think clearly they left that door open for it, but I think this could probably just stand alone, and I kind of don't think that they should, but they probably will, is my guess. What do you think?
I think it would be great if they'd make a sequel as long as Nick is dead before it begins.
I don't think so.
Steph and Anna take on, Scotland in the Apocalypse. I would watch that movie, no problem. And they can find some other male characters who don't have as much baggage that I bring to it, honestly, just because Nick is such an asshole. You don't really want to hang out with him.
No. I mean, again, he gets a little bit more redeemed at the end, but he's still a dick.
So, hey, thanks for listening to our recap of Anna and the Apocalypse. This was a fun zombie movie, good for the light-hearted among you, and thine spouses or partners who don't like zombie stuff, but you do. This is good entry fare, I would say.
All right, y'all, there it is. Anna and the Apocalypse, back and better than ever. Hope you enjoyed it, and stick around. There's more Reanimated coming up soon.